Space was quiet, but everyone in the Varn Empire felt a strange tension in the air. Their scanners picked up a small, lone human ship entering the active war zone. It was slow and looked completely harmless. No weapons were visible. No shields were active. It was a bizarre sight on a battlefield. From the command bridge of his colossal warship, a vessel like a floating city, bristling with cannons and war drones, Captain Zirak of the Varn Empire watched. When he saw the tiny human ship, he laughed out loud. Humans, he scoffed, always thinking they can bring peace with soft words. His officers joined in the laughter. To them, humans were weak, predictably calm, patient, always talking about peace. The Varn Empire operated on a simple truth. Humans would never, ever attack first. But then, the human ship sent a message. It was just one message, only 3 seconds long. A soft, clear female voice said, "Leave this star system now. This is your final warning." A sudden silence fell over Zirak's bridge. "What is this?" one officer stammered. "Is it some kind of joke?" Zirak was angry, but a sliver of confusion cut through his rage. Humans giving warnings? Alone? With one pathetic little ship? This is nothing. He ordered communications to open a channel. But before his voice could even reach the human vessel, something strange happened. The space around the small ship began to flicker. It wasn't like lights or damage. It looked like shadows twisting inside the light itself, as if something immense was hiding just behind the veil of reality. Zirak stepped closer to the main view screen, his long Varn fingers trembling slightly. "What is that?" No one could answer. Inside the small human ship, Commander Asha Grant sat calmly in her command chair. Her face was relaxed, her heartbeat steady. She watched the entire Varn fleet, 100 ships surrounding her from every direction. Anyone else would think she was in mortal danger. She was not. Asha pressed a small switch on her console. A screen lit up, showing multiple timers counting down from 2 minutes. That was all the time the Varn Empire had left. Her co-pilot, Lieutenant Ramos, looked nervous. "Ma'am," he said, "should we warn them again?" Asha just shook her head. "We already did." "They don't listen?" On the Varn flagship, alarms suddenly blared to life. "Captain!" An officer shouted, his voice strained. "We're detecting multiple unknown objects around the human ship." "How many?" Zirak demanded. The officer swallowed hard. "Sir, we can't get a count." Zirak frowned. "Scan again." "We are scanning, sir." The objects appear and disappear. They aren't normal ships. The energy readings are wrong. They're like shadows. Zirak's gaze snapped back to the tiny human ship. "Open a channel," he ordered. The human commander's face appeared on his screen. She was calm, cold, and her expression was unreadable. "Asha Grant," Zirak growled, "you enter our war zone and you threaten us? Is this how humans act now?" Asha looked straight at him. "No, this is how humans act when someone tries to break them." Zirak felt something twist deep in his gut. Was it fear? Impossible. He was a Varn warrior. He didn't fear humans. But looking into her eyes, he felt something ancient and dangerous staring back. He tried to laugh it off. "You think one ship scares us?" Tosha finally smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "Captain Zirak, this isn't one ship." At that exact moment, the shadows around Asha's vessel began to move. A giant, dark shape slowly solidified into view. Then another, then 10 more, and then hundreds. Every shadow was a human warship. But these were ships unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. They were dark, silent, and had no visible engines, looking as if they were carved from darkness itself. They appeared without making a single sound. Screams erupted on Zirak's bridge. "Impossible. Those ships were never on our scanners." "Captain, we're surrounded." Zirak felt his stomach drop, his hands shaking uncontrollably. What? What are these ships? Asha answered calmly. The Shadow Fleet. Humans built them for one reason. Cyrak whispered. For war? Asha shook her head slowly. For justice. The countdown on Asha's screen reached 20 seconds. Her co-pilot whispered, Ma'am, the system is locked. Phase 1 is ready. Asha nodded. Begin. On the Varn flagship, every screen went dark for a split second. Then, a new signal appeared. A deep, emotionless human voice echoed through every ship in the Varn fleet. This is your final reminder. Humans are peaceful. Until peace is broken. Zyrak screamed at his officers. Fire! Fire on the human ships now. But nothing happened. The Varn cannons wouldn't charge. Their engines wouldn't power up. Their shields refused all commands. Everything was dead. Every Varn ship was trapped, frozen, held by a force they couldn't possibly comprehend. Asha watched their panic on her screen. You should have listened to the first warning. The countdown hit 1. A bright, silent flash filled the war zone, and the galaxy learned something it was never meant to forget. Humans are not peacekeepers. Humans are patient killers. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. See you next time. The countdown flash faded, leaving the war zone in an eerie silence. Not a single human ship moved. Not a single weapon fired. They just waited, floating like dark ghosts in the vastness of space. On the Varn flagship, Captain Zyrak stared at his dead screens. His vessel, one of the most powerful in the entire Empire, was completely paralyzed. It couldn't move a single meter. Every system was locked down. Even the air recycling was starting to fail. How are they doing this? An officer cried out, his voice trembling. Humans never had this kind of technology. Zyrak felt a cold dread creep up his spine. They never showed this technology, he corrected, the painful realization hitting him like a physical blow. The humans hadn't been hiding because they were weak. They were hiding because they were preparing. He gazed out at the battlefield. The Shadow Fleet, as they were now calling it, stretched as far as he could see. Hundreds of silent, pitch-black human ships, blocking every possible escape route. They had no running lights, no visible engine trails, and their hulls were completely invisible to scanners. They looked like pieces of the night sky had simply decided to come alive. Aboard Asia Grant's command ship, Lieutenant Ramos double-checked the sensor readings, his voice shaking with a mix of awe and fear. Ma'am, all Varn systems are still frozen. Every single one of their ships is completely disabled. Asha Grant nodded, her expression unreadable. Good. Phase 1 is secure. She looked out at her fleet ships she had trained with for years, but had never before unleashed in combat. They were forged in the darkest, most forgotten corners of the galaxy, inside the cores of dead stars, amidst swirling nebula storms, and at clandestine stations orbiting black holes. No one in the galaxy believed it was possible to engineer anything in such impossibly hostile environments. But humans did. Humans survived everywhere. That was the one thing the galaxy never seemed to understand. Ramos looked at his commander. "M. ... Do we proceed to Phase 2? Asha didn't answer right away. Her eyes were fixed on the Varn flagship, a massive, formidable warship, now utterly helpless. Not yet, she said softly. First, they need to understand. Inside the Varn vessel, chaos erupted on the bridge. Captain, we can't even open the weapon panels. Shields are at 0. Our engines won't power up. We're trapped. Zyrak slammed his fist on the useless console. We are the Varn Empire. We do not get trapped. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. The fear coiling in his gut told him so. He glared at the human commander on his main screen, still impossibly calm, still unmoving. Human! He roared. Release our systems. You have no right to do this. Pasha's voice echoed through his bridge, soft but firm. You were warned. Rage surged through Zyrak. We will fight you. The Empire will never bow. Asha tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something far beyond the confines of her ship. You already lost, Captain. You just don't understand it yet. Frustration curdled into pure terror. What is your goal, human? He demanded. Why bring these dark ships here? Esha finally gave him an answer. To stop the war you refused to stop. Zyrak blinked in confusion. War? We are not at war with humanity. Asha's expression was devoid of any emotion. But you attacked our colonies. Zyrak stiffened. Those were accidents, minor border conflicts. Asha's eyes hardened, becoming as cold and dark as the void outside. Not to us. And then the Shadow Fleet moved. Every single dark ship shifted its position at the exact same instant. It wasn't like a normal maneuver. There were no engine flares, no slow turns. They simply slid through space, as if gravity itself had no claim on them. The Varn officers watched in absolute terror as the fleet formed a perfect massive sphere, enclosing their entire armada. It's a trap formation, one officer screamed. No, another whispered, his face pale. It's something worse. They're preparing for something ... big, Zyrak yelled. Scan them. Do something. We can't, his sensor officer cried back. Our scanners are dead. They shut everything down. Zyrak slammed the console again in helpless fury. How is that even possible? A young ensign, barely out of the academy, whispered what everyone else was thinking. Maybe humans aren't what we thought they were. Everyone froze. Zyrak glared at him. What do you mean? The young officer swallowed hard. Maybe ... maybe they were never peaceful. Maybe they were just waiting. Zyrak felt the chilling truth of those words pierce him like a blade. Yes, that was it. Humans weren't weak. Humans were patient. And patience could be a far more dangerous weapon than any cannon. Asha pressed a command, and her voice broadcast across all 100 ships of the Varn fleet. For a century, humanity watched you expand. You bullied smaller species. You stole resources. You destroyed colonies. Zyrak growled. Those colonies were not human. Asha's reply was instantaneous. But humans live there. Zyrak froze. He had never once considered that. You think humans only fight to protect Earth? Asha's voice continued, cutting through the silence on his bridge. You are wrong. Humans protect anyone they call family. The entire Varn bridge fell silent. Then, the Shadow Fleet stopped moving. Simultaneously, their dark halls began to open. From within each ship, thousands of glowing lines lit up, like burning sigils made of pure light. Aboard Asha's ship, Ramos stared at his console. Am ... the fleet is awakening. Asha nodded slowly. This is the first time they will see what humanity built in the dark. On the Varn ships, officers were screaming. The human ships ... they're charging. Captain, we are completely defenseless. Please, give us orders. But Zyrak had no orders to give. He could only stare at the human fleet, now lighting up the void like a pantheon of silent, vengeful gods. Asha spoke one last time, her voice turning as cold as deep space. You called humans peacekeepers. Today, you learn the truth. Humans are patient killers. The Shadow Fleet fired, but not a single beam hit a Varn ship. Instead, the entire star system shook. The star system shook as if something monstrous had just awakened within it. Planets trembled on their axes. Asteroids shattered into dust. The mighty Varn armada drifted helplessly, their engines dead, while the human Shadow Fleet glowed with strange, burning patterns. On the bridge of the Varn flagship, Captain Zyrak felt the shockwaves slam into his vessel. Lights flickered. Metal groaned in protest. His officers clung to their stations as the massive ship spun slightly off course. What did the humans just do? One officer screamed, his voice filled with panic. Zyrak stared at the main view screen, his mind racing. The human ships hadn't fired a single shot. Not one. So what caused this system-wide paralysis? Then he saw it. Behind the human commander's ship, space itself seemed to warp and bend, as if the star's gravity was being pulled in an entirely new direction. This wasn't a weapon. It was something else. Preparation. Zyrak clenched his jaw, a cold realization dawning on him. They are setting up something. Something big. An older veteran officer at his side whispered, his voice trembling. Humans never do anything without planning it for years. And in that moment, Zyrak finally understood a terrifying truth he never wanted to believe. The humans had been waiting for this day. Inside the human command ship, the atmosphere was the complete opposite. It was a pocket of absolute calm in the heart of the storm. Commander Asha Grant sat in her command chair, silent and still, as thousands of data points streamed across her screens. Temperature fluctuations, gravity distortions, shadow fleet positions, all perfect. Lieutenant Ramos stared at the readings in utter disbelief. "Ma'am, this level of synchronization is impossible. Even AI-driven fleets can't move with this kind of precision." Asha answered without turning her head, her eyes fixed on the unfolding strategy. Humans built the Shadow Fleet for that exact reason, so no one could predict our moves. Ramos let out a long sigh. "I don't think the Varn even understand what is happening." Asha nodded slowly. "They don't. Not yet." Her voice was quiet, almost sad. The galaxy never understood humans. The story the galaxy never knew began a century ago. Back then, humanity was new to galactic politics, friendly, curious, and humble. They traveled in small ships, offering trade, science, and peace. Everyone liked the humans. Until the Varn Empire attacked a human colony. By mistake, they claimed. They called it a small, acceptable loss. But for humans, it was everything. It was a home, a city, a place where families lived. Asha's own grandmother had survived that attack. She was just a child, but she never forgot the screams, the fire, and the night sky burning with a light it should never have known. Humans didn't attack back. Not then. The galaxy praised them for their forgiveness. But they weren't forgiving. They were planning. While the galaxy patronized humans for their perceived weakness, humanity was quietly pushing deeper into dark space. They went where no species dared to venture, into black hole storms, dead star clusters, and regions devoid of all light. And there, in the crushing silence, they built things. Secret things. Massive stations hidden inside collapsed stars. Shipyards concealed within dark nebula clouds. Invisible sensor nets stretching across empty sectors. And then the Shadow Fleet. A fleet forged from a dark matter alloy, impossible to scan, impossible to hear, and impossible to follow. Humans did all of this without making a single sound for 100 years. The Varn Empire believed humans were quiet because they were afraid. The truth was the exact opposite. Humans were quiet because they were preparing. Back in the present, the Varn flagship drifted like a ghost. Their systems were frozen, their engines cold. The ship felt less like a war vessel and more like a prison, with the human fleet forming a perfect, inescapable circle around it. A young officer suddenly shouted, "Captain, there's something else. A message from human historical records." "What message?" Zyrak demanded. The officer swallowed hard. "It's historical data. From 100 years ago?" Zyrak frowned. "Why are our computers receiving human history?" "Because," the officer said, his hands trembling, "the humans want us to know. They're broadcasting the truth to every Varn ship." On the main screen, a video began to play. A destroyed human colony. Crying children. Burnt-out buildings. Human doctors pulling survivors from the rubble. The bridge fell into a stunned, horrified silence. Zyrak felt his heart sink into a pit of cold dread. We did that?" he whispered. The older officer beside him nodded slowly, his face grim. "Yes, and we never apologized. We never helped them rebuild. We simply ignored it." For the first time in his long, decorated career, Zyrak felt a profound sense of shame. Then, Asha Grant's voice echoed across every Varn bridge again, cold and clear as crystal. "We waited for 100 years. We watched you grow stronger. We watched you lie about the colony you destroyed. We watched you push smaller species around." Her voice grew colder, sharper. "And we watched you prepare to attack humans again." Zyrak shouted back, a desperate, useless act. "No, we were not planning a war." But Asha heard. Her reply was instant and devastating. "We intercepted your war plans. We know about Operation Iron Nest. We know you planned to capture human trade routes. We know you built weapons aimed at human worlds." Zyrak fell silent. On his bridge, every officer slowly turned to look at him, their faces a mixture of shock and accusation. They knew. They all knew she was telling the truth. The white flash from the star didn't fade this time. It just hung there, a blinding, silent scream across the system. On the bridge of the Varn flagship, every officer shielded their eyes as alarms blared. Captain Zyrak felt an impossible heat on his face, right through the sealed hull of his ship. "What are the humans doing?" he roared, his voice drowned out by the chaos. "A star cannot explode like this." His older, more seasoned officer just shook his head, his face pale. "Captain, that is not a natural solar flare. This is controlled." Zyrak turned slowly, a cold dread creeping up his spine. Controlled by who? Every officer on the bridge met his gaze, their eyes reflecting the same terrifying answer. Humans. Meanwhile, aboard the human command ship, Commander Asha Grant watched the readings with unnerving calm. The star's brilliant light was a perfect smokescreen, hiding her entire shadow fleet from sight. But Asha didn't need her eyes. Her mind was linked to the network, seeing everything. "Phase 2 is active," her second-in-command Ramos reported. "Gravity anchors have been deployed." Asha gave a curt nod. "Begin the star net." Ramos hesitated just for a moment. "Ma'am? Once we activate it, the Varn fleet can't leave. They will be trapped completely." Asha's expression didn't change. She didn't even blink. They already made their choice. Out in the blinding glare of the flare, the hulls of the Shadow Fleet slid open once more. From each ship, thin, glowing threads, like strands of pure blue fire, shot out into the void. Thousands upon thousands of them. They began to weave and wrap around the distant star, forming a colossal, intricate web. Each glowing line connected to another ship, forming a massive, shimmering circle that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. It was a trap. A perfect, invisible prison made of light and gravity. Zyrak's scanners flickered back online for less than a second, but it was long enough. Long enough for his officers to scream, "Captain!" Gravity spikes all around the star. Another yelled, "Something is pulling us in." A third shouted in panic, "We can't break free." Zyrak gripped the arms of his command chair, his knuckles white. The entire ship was being dragged, inch by agonizing inch, toward the center of the system. "It's a gravity cage?" He roared in disbelief. The humans, they turned the entire star into a weapon. The young officer at the helm whispered, his voice trembling, "No, not a weapon. A trap." And then a voice cut through the chaos on every Varn ship. It was calm, clear, and cold. It was Asha Grant. "You ignored our warnings. You crossed lines again and again. So we built lines that you can never cross." Zyrak frantically tried to open a communications channel to reply, to protest, but everything was blocked. Asha's voice continued, an uninvited ghost in his machine. "The star net is not designed to kill you. It is designed to stop your escape. We want you to understand. Before we end this, one of Zyrak's officers trembled. And what, Captain? What does she mean? Zyrak had a dark, sinking feeling that he already knew. This wasn't a spontaneous act of war. This was the culmination of a plan years in the making. Asha remembered it all. Decades ago, human scientists discovered a strange anomaly about stars. Their immense gravity could be bent, manipulated, with the right application of energy. So humans began to test it, slowly, carefully, secretly. They built the first gravity anchors near a dead star system, where no one would ever look. Then the second. Then the 10th. The galaxy never noticed, because humans stayed quiet. Humans stayed calm. Humans stayed patient. When the Varn began their incursions, threatening human colonies once more, the project was accelerated. Asha had sworn an oath when she joined the Shadow Fleet. We strike only when the enemy refuses peace. And the Varn had refused, again and again. Aboard the Varn flagship, the ship groaned as it was pulled relentlessly forward by invisible chains of gravity. Captain, we're on a collision course with the rest of the fleet. Stabilizers are failing. There is no way out. Zyrak's breath grew heavy in his chest. We must send a surrender signal, he whispered, the words tasting like ash. Communications are still blocked, an officer replied weakly. Zyrak slammed his fist on the console. Then we must beg for mercy in any way we can. But Asha wasn't listening to pleas. She was remembering. Remembering the colonies the Varn had raised. Remembering the stories her grandmother told of worlds lost. Remembering that in all that time, the Varn never once apologized. The glowing web around the star pulsed, growing brighter. The ships of the Shadow Fleet shifted their positions, pulling the net into a tighter and tighter circle. Ramos spoke softly, his voice full of awe. Ma'am, the trap is complete. Asha looked out at the star, her voice pure ice. Then lock the net? Ramos pressed the final switch. A sound like distant, rolling thunder echoed through the void, a vibration felt in the very bones of every ship. The Varn fleet jerked violently as the gravity cage snapped shut. Escape was now impossible. Zyrak screamed as his ship shook itself apart around him. Why are they doing this? We are not at war with them. The old officer beside him whispered the terrible truth. Because we were. We just never admitted it. Aisha Grant rose from her command chair. Her face was a mask of calm, but her eyes were forged from steel. She opened a channel that forced itself onto every single view screen in the Varn fleet. This trap is not for your destruction. Zyrak froze, staring at her image. It is for your understanding. Asha took a deliberate step forward. Humans do not start wars. Humans finish them. And we finish them slowly. The Shadow Fleet glowed brighter. The star net tightened again, a noose of light. Asha's voice softened, but it carried more menace than any shout. Next comes Phase 3. You will feel it soon. The Varn officers stared at each other, their faces etched with pure terror. Zyrak could only whisper one question into the sudden silence of his bridge. What is Phase 3? Asha answered him. The great silence. The star pulsed one last time, and every Varn ship went dark. Every single Varn ship went dark at the same time. Someone had blown out thousands of candles with one breath. Lights died, engines shut down, weapons froze. Even the emergency power vanished. Inside the Varn flagship, Captain Zyrak felt the hair on his arms rise. This wasn't a normal power failure. This was something deeper, something unnatural. An officer shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Captain, we have nothing, not even life support systems. Zyrak stared at the pitch-black view screens. The bridge was deathly quiet, filled only with the heavy breathing of frightened officers. What did the humans do? He whispered, more to himself than anyone else. An older, grizzled officer, his face pale as a ghost, replied, "They called it Phase 3, the Great Silence." Meanwhile, aboard the human command ship, Commander Asha Grant stood perfectly calm as her vessel glowed with soft blue lights. Human systems were untouched. The Shadow Fleet, their secret weapon, was untouched. Only the Varn Armada was silent, adrift, and completely helpless. Her second-in-command, Ramos, stared at the sensor readings, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Ma'am," his silence pulse worked perfectly. "All Varn ships are dead in the water. They can't move, can't communicate, can't even turn on their lights." Asha simply nodded. "Good. Now they will listen." Ramos frowned, confused. "Listen? They can't hear anything. Their comms are dead too." Shaja pressed a button on her console, not to our voice, to the silence. And in that moment, Ramos finally understood. The humans weren't trying to exterminate the Varn. They wanted them to feel powerless, to feel exactly what humans had felt a century ago. The silence inside the Varn flagship was more terrifying than any weapon. Panic began to ripple through the crew. "We have no air filtration," one officer yelled. "Central oxygen is failing," screamed another. "We're going to suffocate. We need help." Zyrak slammed his fist on the dead console. "Stop shouting and think. There must be something we can do." But deep down, they all knew the truth. There was nothing. They couldn't fight. They couldn't run. They couldn't even call for help. A young officer whispered, his voice trembling, "Captain, we are at their mercy." Zyrak sank into his command chair. For the first time in his long, decorated career, he felt utterly small. Asha remembered the day it all began. She was just a child when her grandmother told her the story. After the Varn Empire mercilessly destroyed a human colony, humanity sent no reply. No threats, no fleets, no diplomats. They just went silent. The rest of the galaxy thought humans had simply accepted their loss. But they were wrong. Humans were grieving, and humans grieve quietly. That silence lasted for 100 years. A century of quiet rage. A century of patient, meticulous planning as they secretly built the Shadow Fleet. The very same suffocating silence now trapped the entire Varn Armada. The dark, angular human ships glided closer, forming a tighter ring around the helpless Varn vessels. Their glowing lines pulsed like a single massive heartbeat, each beat growing stronger. Ramos watched them, awestruck. "Ma'am, the fleet is signaling. They're ready." Asha nodded, her expression unreadable. "It is time to show the Varn why we warned them." Inside the Varn flagship, total darkness surrounded them. The only light came from the faint, distant glow of the system's star. An officer's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, oxygen levels are dropping." "How fast?" Zyrak asked, his voice strained. "We have 1 hour, maybe less, before it becomes critical." The crew's discipline shattered. "We need to talk to the humans. We must surrender. They'll kill us if we don't do something." Zyrak felt a surge of anger, but this time it wasn't aimed at the humans. It was aimed at himself, at his empire. "We caused this," he whispered. "We ignored all their warnings." The officer beside him said quietly, "Captain, the humans never wanted this war." Zyrak closed his eyes. "I know." Suddenly, the star at the center of the system seemed to pulse. A wave of energy washed over the Varn ships, shaking every metal surface. The silence broke for a single terrifying second as the Shadow Fleet unleashed a deep, thunderous sound that echoed across space cold, powerful, ancient. Then, just as quickly, the silence returned. A soundless threat. Ramos shivered. "Ma'am, that was terrifying." Asha looked straight ahead. "Good. They must understand fear. Only then can they understand what they did to us." After several long minutes of perfect darkness, Asha finally activated a controlled communication beam, aimed only at the Varn flagship. Their main screen flickered once, then came to life. Captain Zyrek gasped. He saw Asha Grant's face calm, cold, and completely unshaken. She spoke, her voice soft but carrying immense weight. This is the great silence. Now you understand what you made humans feel. Zyrek swallowed hard, his throat dry. His voice was low, broken. What do you want from us? Asha's answer was a single sharp word. Truth. Zyrek blinked, confused. Truth? She nodded. You lied about the colony you destroyed. You hid the attack. You blamed others. And you planned more attacks against us. Zyrek lowered his head in shame. Asha's eyes never softened. Humans waited 100 years for you to admit what you did, Zyrek whispered. I am sorry. Asha leaned closer to the camera. Say it louder. Tears filled the warrior's eyes. He had never felt so utterly defeated. He took a ragged breath and shouted, his voice echoing through his silent bridge. I am sorry. The Varn Empire is sorry. Asha didn't react. She simply said, Phase 4 begins now. Zyrek's heart stopped. What is Phase 4? Asha answered, her voice as cold as deep space. Judgment. The entire Shadow Fleet lit up, and the darkness around the Varn ships shattered into a brilliant, blinding light. The room inside the alien command ship felt colder than before. General Vora finally stopped pacing and stared at the hologram floating in the center of the chamber. It showed the map of the Milky Way bright stars, dark voids, and one tiny, glowing point highlighted in red. Earth. For a long moment, no one in the chamber spoke. Even the machines hummed more quietly, as if they sensed the danger in the air. Commander Threx was the first to break the silence. We cannot wait any longer, he said, his voice tight. We need to warn the Council. If the humans are truly preparing, then the entire galaxy is in danger. General Vora's voice was low, almost a whisper. No, the galaxy is already in danger. We are too late. A young officer stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she spoke. General, we just translated the last part of the human broadcast. It is not a threat. It is a countdown. Everyone froze. Countdown? Threx's voice cracked. Yes, sir, she whispered. The message repeats one phrase in every language we can identify. We do not want war, but we are ready. And after that, numbers. The sequence restarts every 30 minutes. A wave of fear washed over the room. Vora slowly walked toward the hologram, her black armor reflecting the ominous red light of Earth. A species that hides its strength, waits quietly, and then announces a countdown to the entire galaxy? She shook her head in disbelief. No other race would dare. Threx swallowed hard. What happens when the countdown ends? No one had an answer. Meanwhile, far away, inside an abandoned mining station on the edge of the Perseus Arm, a small alien listening post received something unexpected. The station was old, dusty, and mostly forgotten. Only 2 workers operated it, a tired engineer named Rello and his young assistant, Mira. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The main screen in front of them dissolved into static, then reformed into a symbol neither had ever seen. A perfect circle with a single line cutting straight through it. What is that? Mira asked, leaning closer. Relo's tail curled tightly, a sign of deep fear among his species. I don't know, he stammered. But it's not from any known Empire signal. The screen flashed again. This time, it showed something far worse. A human face, calm, blank, utterly unemotional. Mira gasped and stepped back. Turn it off. Turn it off now. The human image didn't speak. It only stared, as if looking directly at them across countless light years of space. Then, words appeared slowly on the screen. We see you. Mira screamed. Rello slammed his fists on the console, shutting down the entire system. The room plunged into darkness. But the message remained, glowing on one small emergency display. Relo's voice shook. How did they reach us? This station is off every map. No one knows we are here. Mayra whispered, her voice trembling. Humans know. Back on the command ship, the Council's emergency room was filled with delegates from across the galaxy. Blue-skinned diplomats, scaled warriors, insectoid thinkers, every major species had sent their strongest minds. They all watched the same footage. The message from Earth. The countdown. The stare. The words. We are ready. A tall elder rose from his seat, his voice booming. This cannot be real. Humans are weak. Their world is small. Their technology is centuries behind ours. General Vora shook her head firmly. No, we misjudged them. They wanted us to think they are weak. It was a trap. A long, patient trap. Threx added, his voice grave. We have reports coming in. Across the galaxy, hidden human signals are waking up. Old satellites, dead stations, long-forgotten probes. They are all activating at once. Another diplomat whispered in horror. Like a net being closed. Vora nodded slowly. Exactly. Panic erupted through the council chamber. One delegate shouted, We must send a peace envoy immediately. Another yelled, No! If we approach Earth now, they might see it as an act of aggression. A third voice cried, We should attack now, before their countdown ends. Vora slammed her fist on the table. Silence. The room fell quiet instantly. She leaned forward, her eyes glowing with fierce determination. We cannot show fear. If humans are truly hiding their strength, then our panic will only help them. We need information. Real information. Not rumors. Threx hesitated, then spoke. General, there is one more part of the signal. I didn't want to show it until you were ready. Vora narrowed her eyes. Show it. The lights in the chamber dimmed. The hologram switched to a final video clip. A battlefield. The ruins of a city shrouded in smoke and ash. And in the center stood a single human soldier. Alone, not attacking. Just watching. Behind him stood thousands of human machines, tall, armored, silent war mechs. Not moving, not blinking, just waiting. Vora felt a chill she had never known run through her entire body. What? What are they waiting for? She whispered. The video ended with one final, haunting sentence. The galaxy forgot what we are. You will remember. Threx stepped back, his face pale. General? That was not a threat. It was a promise. Vora closed her eyes. Then we must prepare. Because the countdown is still running. And somewhere, far across the silent void of space, the numbers continued ticking down. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content like this. See you next time. The countdown had reached its final hour. Across the galaxy, every screen that once showed static now displayed the same glowing numbers. Markets froze. War fleets paused. Entire civilizations held their breath, united by a single terrifying question. On the main bridge of the command ship, General Vora stood rigid, her eyes locked on the holographic map. Earth pulsed, a tiny red dot that felt like a heartbeat counting down to doom. Her commander, Threx, approached, his voice barely a whisper. General, we've finished the final scan. Every human satellite, even the ones that have been drifting for centuries, is active again. Vora didn't flinch. What did they activate? Threx's reply sent a chill through the room. All of them. Everything they ever launched into space. The realization hit like a shockwave. This race, which they had dismissed as primitive and weak, had been preparing for generations right under their noses. At a deep space listening post on the far side of the galaxy, 3 alien technicians stared at the clock. 10 minutes left. One of them murmured, What happens when it hits 0? Suddenly, their screens flared to life. A signal, cleaner and more powerful than anything they had ever recorded, was beaming directly from Earth. The youngest technician stammered, This isn't a weapon. It's coordinates?" The beam pulsed with numbers and patterns, mapping every military base, every armada, every hidden listening post in the galaxy. The station commander whispered in disbelief. They knew where everything was. They always knew. Back on the command ship, fear had replaced pride in the council chamber. General Vora addressed the silent delegates. "The humans want us to understand something," she said, her voice echoing. "For years, we watched them. We laughed at them. We underestimated them." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "But humans were watching us too." A delegate from the insectoid Krell shivered. Why were they so quiet? Why not show their strength sooner? Vora's reply was slow and deliberate. "Because patience is a weapon too." Just then, Threx burst into the room, his face pale. "General, the countdown is at 90 seconds. The room went dead silent. The hologram switched to the galaxy map, the red dot of Earth glowing brighter and brighter until it was the only light. 10, 9, 8, every screen flickered. 7, 6. Every alien heart pounded. 5. General Vora whispered, "Everyone stand ready." 4. Threx shut his eyes. 3. The galaxy held its breath. 2. A final message from humanity appeared. "We are done hiding." 1. 0. There was no explosion, no attack, no fleet. Instead, something far worse happened. Every starship engine across the entire galaxy shut down for just 3 seconds. But those 3 seconds changed everything. Mighty warships drifted off course. Carrier fleets spun uselessly in the void. Entire armadas went dark. Gasps and cries of disbelief erupted on every command bridge. Vora stared at her officer. What just happened?" Threx's voice trembled. "They hacked the galaxy, General. Every ship, every system. For 3 seconds. Humans controlled everything." Panic swept the room. "Impossible," a diplomat cried out. "How could one small world do this?" Vora closed her eyes. "They've been inside our networks for centuries, watching, learning, waiting." Beneath it, a message read, "We do not seek to rule. We do not seek war. But the galaxy will never threaten Earth again." The image faded, replaced by one last sentence. "Remember what we are capable of when we decide to stand." For a long moment, the silence was absolute. Finally, Threx whispered, "So, what do we do now?" General Vora turned to the hologram, her decision made. "We leave Earth alone," she said firmly. "We send a message of peace, and we hope. We hope humans want the same." The council nodded, fear still shaking their hands. They finally understood. Humans were not monsters or conquerors. They were something far more terrifying. They were patient, and patience is deadly.